screen. World of the Zohar. Let's go to the top. Last time we talked about the Sfirat HaOmer, and we got ourselves gently into the world of the Sefirot, okay, which is of course really important for in the world of the Zohar. And this Sfirat HaOmer is clearly very associative. I promised all sorts of things. I did mention the sexy word sex, okay, but we're probably going to do that next week because I'm going to do it in a different context. And I have an idea, Mishnah Brura, the Zohar, when it becomes part of Halakha, when it doesn't, but what we do with matters pertaining to sex, I should say. But this week we'll focus on the liturgy. So, Jeff, can you give us number one?
Okay, another example of Sfirot in the liturgy is the Ushpizin.
Now, do any of you know about Ushpizin?
Yes.
Of course.
Of course. Do you do them?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What's the source? I'm going to read it off now. It's in the Zohar. Hele Gimel, Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Bet. Ki had Rav Hamnuna Saba. We haven't gone into a lot of stuff in the Zohar, but the circle of the Rashbi had a lot of Sabas. They liked that because Saba is like mystical and full of ancient wisdom. There's also a Yanuka. There's a kid in the Zohar who who demonstrates brilliant understanding of the mystical world. And this gives it a whole sort of, a bit of a sex appeal. So we've got Sabas, we've got kids, and they accompany Rashbi, and they are present at the various symposia that he holds, the Idra Zuta, Idra Rabbah. You may know that Rav Goren's Kolel, just next to the Kotel, is called Idra Rabbah. It's the great Kabbalistic convention. Anyhow, Kad Hava Ayel L'Sukkah, when he went up to his Sukkah, Hava Chadi, he was very happy, full of joy. V'ka'im al pitcha de sukkah milagav, he would stand at the entrance to the sukkah, va'amar nezamen le'ushpizin, and then he would invite in guests. Now the guests he would invite are human guests. We all know that part of this samachta b'chagecha has to be bringing in people into your sukkah. Simcha is not feeding yourself and having a lot to drink, but it is sharing with others who are less fortunate. Rambam, in his Mishneh Torah, makes the point very strongly and says, whoever doesn't bring a guest, a needy guest, into his or her sukkah, is really acting in a very tacky fashion. Okay. So Rav Hamnuna would say, Basukot teshvu shivat yamim. You shall ask Mickey. It says here this meeting is being recorded. I have doubts as to the recording, but my doubtful Thomas has been silenced. Okay, and has grinned accordingly. Basukot teshvu shivat yamim. Now, what Rav Hamnuna did was a hypostasis. Remember hypostasis?
Yeah.
Right, you have your human guest sitting around, and then what does the Kabbalist of the Zohar see? He sees mystical figures. He sees the fathers of Jewish history coming in together with the guests. And then what does he see in the fathers of Jewish history? The seven Sfirot. The seven Sfirot are the seven lower Sfirot with which human beings can engage. Okay, they contain both HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tiferet, and Malchut, which is the Shekhinah, and they can, as we will say often in different forms, influence the upper world, harmony in the Sfirot, and then God's loving kindness channels down and influences this world. So we, the humans, are the center of the Kabbalistic world. It is an absolutely anthropomorphic center. None of this Rambam stuff about most people not being very important and only the intellectuals and the neo-prophets being the important ones. Every single Jewish soul has a job and can do amazing things. Basukot teshvu shivat yamim tevu ushpizin ilayin tevu. These are the upper ushpizin, the ones that you refer to in the pasuk pasukot teshu shivat yamim. Tevu ushpize mehemanuta, the ushpizin of faith. Okay, the guests of faith. Tevu, sit. Arim yadoi v'chadi, he would then raise his hands and become even more joyful and say, Zaka'a chulkena, how we have merited this special place. Our chelik is so wonderful. Zaka'a chulkahon d'Israel dichtiv, ki chelik Hashem amo. We are part of God. That's how the Zohar understands the pasuk. And God is known to the world only through us. He needs us. The idea of God needing us is expressed perhaps tangentially in a Gemara or in a Midrash. Definitely a Kabbalistic idea. God needs us, but yes, the hava yati, then he would sit. Tinyana, the second part of the pasuk called Ezrak B'Yisrael Yeshu Basukot, Livnei Alma, is to regular people. So you see the hypostasis here. You have your regular people. You're fulfilling the mitzvah of Haknasat Orchim. Those regular people morph into who? The lower seven sfirot. Jeff, can you continue, please?
The lower seven sfirot are identified with the seven ushpizin of Sukkot. Abraham Chesed, Yitzchak Gvura.
As we say, Pachad Yitzchak, Gvura, fear, all. Abraham is all Chesed. Yaakov, as we said, is
Yair Tiferet. Moshe Netzach.
On the right hand side, Aaron Hod on the left hand side. Yosef
Yesod.
Why is Yosef Yesod? Because he was able to control his sexual drive. Yesod, remember, is the male reproductive organ, the middle of that human representation of God, which is so typical of the Kabbalah and of other ancient systems. We have a symbol. There's this Renaissance symbol where you have a man, William Blake, hands stretched out, the head, okay? This goes back to the Greek, to the hieros gamos, okay? It was Leonardo da Vinci with that very, very precise diagrammatic form of a human being. There's a whole mystical background there. And these are the seven sirot. Yosef, who had absolute control of the sexual drive, okay? Resisted Potiphar. He's Yosef HaTzadik, symbol of the Yesod, and therefore any misuse of the sexual attribute is a sin against the Sephirotic system. We'll go into this because we'll talk about Hashkatat Zera and other things like that next week. David is Malchut. Hamelech David. Who else? So, as I said, human guests, hypostasis, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David, and then the seven sfirot which affect the upper world and the lower world. Jeff, can you read on, please?
And the entire ceremony is pervaded with mysticism and is replete with references to the Kabbalah.
And of course, Kabbalah always likes to be in archaic Aramaic. Okay? So, Jeff, could you read the next bit, please?
No.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
יעמוד בפתח הסוכה מבחוץ ויאמר.
Now, Petach Sukkah מבחוץ is Zohar. It's Rav Hamnuna, who was Milegav at the Petach of the Sukkah. And then, what do you say?
Ulu ishpizin ilayin kadishin. Ulu avhan ilayin kadishin. למיטב בצילה דהמנותא העלאה בצילה כקדוש ברוך הוא. לקודש ברוך הוא. יעול אברהם ואימי יצחק ויעקב, משה, אהרון, יוסף ודוד.
Does anybody know how to sing this? Has anybody sung this?
Yeah, we have.
There is a tune, okay? But this is what's said. Ulu ushpizin ilayin kadishin, the holy and upper guests should come in. Okay, there is a melody going on my left. If you picked it up, it's fine. Otherwise,
shouldn't be listening to women.
you
too.
have to go to somebody who takes this seriously. But most of us will refer to Ushpizin one way or the other. It's a nice thing, right? You can have pictures on the wall of the sukkah. You might even say Ulu Ushpizin. But you are talking in mystical terms. Now, Tzila Demheimanuta is the shade of faith. Ilah B'tzila Kucha Brichu, the shade of God. I'm not going to go into Hoshana Rabbah and the belief in the Zohar that if you see your shadow at a certain time on Hoshana Rabbah night, you'll be able to tell how long you'll live, what your fate will be, but we'll leave that aside. But you have to be naked and wrapped in a sheet when you do it. All very weird. Look it up, okay? But it is absolute gospel truth, okay?
There's another version, yeah.
Okay, so if we can cut out the private conversations, please. And then you will mention them each night. And v'achar kach yomar. Tivu ushpizin ilain. Tivu ishpuzin kadishin. Tivu is simply to sit. Taf and shin change Aramaic to Hebrew. Demehemanuta. Zakah. Chulkei hon di Israel. And Israel has this beautiful, pure chelek in bringing these celestial beings down to earth and then influencing the Sifirot. And then you'll say, L'shem yichud kutsha berichu ushinte. What does that mean? We say it, many of us say it, some of us don't on principle, before other mitzvot too. Sfirat HaOmer, a favorite, L'shem yichud kutsha berichu moment. But yichud is, of course, a bringing together in a hieros gamos way, sacred marriage of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is which? Sephira Tiferet. And Shekhinah is Malchut. That's what we have to do in this world, okay? Leyachad Hashem Yud Hei Bavav Hei. We're going to do Patach Rabbi Eliyahu, which is a whole Kabbalistic introduction that's said in Nusach Edot HaMizrach, the theosophy of the Kabbalah. But basically, they play with the names of God all the time. Different letters, different combinations. We'll see if we have patience for that as the summer goes by. B'yuchuda shlim, perfect unity, alidei hahu tamir v'ne'elam b'shem kol Yisrael. Now, this is very Kabbalistic, tamir v'ne'elam, to be hidden, to be half revealed. Some people say it on Seder night, okay? V'hi noam Hashem Eloheinu. Okay, right. Now, B'shah shenichnas l'sukkah b'pam harishona v'achar kach sukkot yomar. I'm not going to read this out. You can read this when you're in a Kabbalistic mood, okay? But this is, again, a lot to do with the spiritual and the mystical side. And whenever you go into the sukkah to sit down, of course, well, anyhow, we'll skip the rest, but you get the idea. If you allude to Ushpizin, you are Kabbalist, but everything we do has been pervaded by the Kabbalah. In our liturgy, we're only beginning this evening, because I want to do the Mishnah Brura on all the Kabbalistic bits that come in next week. Number 2, let's see. Shmuley, are you around?
No,
No. Then I can't ask you to read 2, can I?
no, I don't really to. Another Kabbalistic idea that pervades the liturgy is the 42-letter name of God in the Anabakach prayer attributed to the Tanab of Nechunya ben Hakana, to whom the authorship of the mystical work Sefer Hakana is attributed.
We know that he definitely is meant to have written Sefer HaBahir and Sefer HaTmunah, but the tradition attributes the Sefer HaKana to him. Now, I did mention to you very early on that another concern of the Kabbalah were the names of God. Now, we'll see Maimonides' critique of this shortly, but the names of God are varied and many. Kabbalah loves long names of God. The 42-letter name of God, the 72-letter name of God. So let's have a look at the 42 letter name. It turns out that it is Ana Bekoach. Now, if you were to take an amulet or a mystical work, let's have a look at this. The Nozick Synagogue of Warsaw. Anybody familiar with the history of the Jews of Warsaw? The Nozick Shul? Well, then I won't labor the point. But this was a very important synagogue in Warsaw. And if you would come in, you'd have a look at this chart. You'd see Yud He Vav He. Well, you know more or less what that is. But then around the corners, you'll say Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Yud, Taf, Tzadi, Kuf, Reish, Ayin, Shin, Tet, Nun, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Yud, Kaf, Shin, Bet, Taf, Reish, Tzadi, Taf, Gimel, Chet, Kuf, Bet, Tet, Nun, Ayin, Yud, Gimel, Lamed, Hey, Zayin, Kuf, Shin, Kuf, Vav, Tzadi, Yud, Taf, Bet, Yud, Shin, Yud, Kaf, Kaf, Yud, Mem, Yud, La. And you'd be magic, a spell, okay? What is this? It's a bit like the kuzu b'michzaz kuzu that you all discovered on the back of your muzuzot, correct? Without knowing what it was doing there. So, this is Kabbalah. The name of God is represented by the letters of the prayer Ana Bekoach. So if we read this, Aleph is Ana, Bekoach, Gedulat, Yemincha, Tatir, Surura, Kabel, Rinat, Amcha, Sagvenu, Tarenu, Nora, Na Gibor Dorshe Yichudecha. What's next? Kevovat, Shavreim, Barchem, Tareim, Rachameim, Nitkatka, Tamid, Gamleim, Hasin, Kadosh, Barov Tuvcha, Nahel Adatcha,
Shabbatenu kabel ushma.
Shavatenu kabel, okay, ushma tzakatenu yodea talumot. So we end up with a tough. Then we have bet shin mem, bet shin kaf, mem lamed vav. What could that be?
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus
Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Va'ed. Exactly. Because if the name of God and you've just pronounced it, what you have to say afterwards? Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Out loud or softly?
Out loud or softly is a good question. Okay, we should do it softly, and that is basically how we do it, except on Yom Kippur night, and there are reasons for that too. But anyhow, this is the 42 letter name of God, Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, and it's much more mysterious.
On Zohar.
It's much more mysterious if it's just presented to you as these funny letters, like Hurrah Satan. Well, that's a good clue. That would mean tear Satan, right? But it's actually not Kara Satan at all. It is Kabel Rinat Amcha, Sagvenu Tarenu Nora. But you might be able to hypostasize that into an anti-Satan device, magic. So if you stick it on an amulet, on a kemeah, and you put it round in its coat, perhaps it's going to protect a pregnant woman against disease or against problems in the pregnancy. It's going to look after your health, okay? And if you look at your amulets and you look at the things that Kabbalists write on these little bits of parchment they give you to stick into a necklace or a bracelet, Ana Bekoach, a 42-letter name of God. Okay, now let's read a little more. I've said that it's a divine name. That's why on Friday night, do you say it in the service, by the way, after Lecha Dodi? Who does?
Yakar, they do.
So important. Before the Chag.
Everyone. And do you say Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto after it?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course. You're all Kabbalists now. And the whole of the Chadodi is a Kabbalistic thing. Which century did it begin and where?
15th century?
Luria,
16th century in
Tzfat.
Tzfat. And who composed it?
Luria,
Rabbi Shlomo Al-Kabetz.
Alphabets.
Alphabet.
Chavruta
Yeah.
Rabbi Yosef Karo in Adrianople on the night of Shavuot, when Rabbi Karo suddenly began to speak with a different voice, and a mystical entity was speaking through him and to Al-Kabetz, telling them that they were doing the right thing by staying up all night on Shavuot, preparing the bride for the wedding with her mate, okay? The Shekhinah and Tiferet, and this is how we are going to save the world. All of you are Kabbalists, okay? Now, the Tikkunei HaZohar. Who else do we have? Shmuley, you haven't read much. Continue, please.
The Tikkunei HaZohar explains as follows. Each of the 7 lines corresponds to one of the days of creation and the 7 Sefirot. The Aleph in Anna refers to Keter, the Bet of Bekoach to Chochmah, the Gimel of Gedula is linked to Gomelut, which is
Gomelet,
Gomelet.
somebody feminine who gives of herself to nurture others.
Which is the feminine attribute of giving, or Bina. The Yud, Tav, and Sadi of Yataz refer to Da'at, Tiferet, and Sadik Yesod, Olam, etc.
So, again, we're just going through this very on the surface, but there we are. Ana Bekoach. And who else do we have? Who would like to read now? Victor, you must be around. Can you give us the Tikkunei HaZohar? By the way, the Zohar is divided up into different works. The Tikkunim, you've got the Zohar itself on the parasha, you've got Raya Mehemna. I mean, I suggest that you read it up. You'll read this on Wikipedia easily enough. But the Zohar is not one work like Shas. It's a conglomeration of different works put together, some of them in very different style with different topics. Okay, Victor, please, the Tikkunei HaZohar.
Wait, didn't you just do that? Okay. The Tikkunei HaZohar
Oh, no,
explains this.
sorry. One of Rashi's
Okay.
sayings.
I was listening. One of
Yeah, you
Rashbi's sayings cited in the Tikkunim is that the word bam in the pasuk Pitchuli Sha'arei Tzedek Avovam Odeya Tehillim is 42 in Gematria.
Is
And
Vam 42?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. It's very easy. Mem is 40, Bet is 2. Now, again, a Kabbalist of the Zohar looks at every pasuk and everything in the tradition from a Kabbalistic perspective. So if I want the doors of heaven to be open to me, I need to dwell on the 42-letter name of God. Now, then the plot thickens. Victor, in the Zohar HaChadash,
Breshit 19, the Kohen Gadol entered the Kodesh HaKodashim uttering the 42-letter name as a pure neshama.
he had, as it were, totally hypostasized. He was no longer in flesh. Kohen Gadol is pure spirit. And he does it by using the 42-letter name of God. Pitchuli Sha'arei Tzedek, the Kodesh HaKodashim. Avovam, how do I come into the Kodesh HaKodashim? Vam, with the 42-letter name of God. Now, let's see. The 42-letter name, one more line, please.
The 42-letter name is referred to in the Talmud, Kedushin, and Rabbeinu Tam, blah, 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 connects it to the number of letters in the beginning of Breshit. And this idea is expanded by Rav Bahai on Breshit.
1, 2. So, B'chaye, however you want to say it, but there is a reference in the Gemara, in Masechet Kiddushin, to the 42-letter name of God. All these ideas go back a long time.
Better than the 72 letter.
42 is very powerful. The 72 is so powerful that we never use it. Okay? So the Kohen Gadol now is 42, because this is referred to in the Gemara, but again, very, very briefly, as something which only the most spiritually talented people should ever concern themselves with. Doesn't say anything about the Kohen Gadol, doesn't say anything about us connecting with it every time we say Ana Bekoach. We'll see this shortly in the Rambam. So what other readers do we have? Harvey, Rosh.
Yeah, one moment. Okay, Rosh points out. Yeah, Rosh points out that this was the Shem Hamaforash that the Kohen Gadol used when entering the Kodesh HaKodeshim on Yom Kippur.
Ne'emar b'Shem Rabbi Yehudai Gaon. So it's a Gaonic tradition. Ki Shem Ze, Shem Membet, הזכיר הכהן הגדול בכניסתו לקודש הקודשים ביום הכיפורים. Rosh is a halakhic authority, but Kabbalah gets everywhere, even in a medieval halakhic authority such as the Rosh. Rabbeinu Tam, okay? So the names are definitely part of a much more ancient tradition. We didn't need the Zohar for that, but the Zohar brings it into our lives by giving each and every one of us. We don't need to be a Kohen Gadol. Going into the Kodesh HaKodeshim on Yom Kippurim, every time we say Ana B'Koach on an Erev Shabbat or any other time, or after Sfirat HaOmer, we too can become part of this name of God. This is the great revolution of the Zohar did. Now, are we ready for a bit of criticism? Harvey, would you read Maimonides?
Maimonides, not surprisingly, was highly critical of those who sought to find in these secondary names, besides Hashem, which is the only Shem HaMeforash.
There's only one Shem HaMeforash, says the Rambam, and that's Yud Hey Vav Hey. All the rest is, of course, not, well, okay, we'll see shortly. Any
inherent significance. All they do is provide the intellectually perfect with theological insights.
Now I'm going to read a section from the Moreh Nevuchim. B'da and know. שזה הדבר שילומד היה לימוד העניינים שמורים עליהם השמות ההם, לא הדיבור לבד באותיות הערומות מכל ציור. So, these names are names, and they actually direct us to become more intellectually sharp, and they are ideas. We're not meant to say them, and we're not meant to try and find all sorts of cunning ways of bringing them into our lives. ולא נקרא כלל שם בין 42 אותיות שם המפורש. Would be absolutely wrong to call the 42 so-called letter name of God the Shem HaMeforash, the ineffable name which the Kohen Gadol was only allowed to use once a year on Yom HaKippurim. אבל Shem HaMeforash הוא Shem המיוחד לו כמו שביארנו. This is the Tetragrammaton and everything that it stands for. אומנם אלו מלמדים קצת חוכמה אלוהית בהכרח. The other names help you get on the way to understanding the one and only ineffable name of God. והראיה היותו מלמד חוכמה, אמרה עליו, שם בן 42 אותיות קדוש ומקודש. Now, the Gemara in Kiddushin, which of course the Rambam has to accept, he does accept, says that that name of 42 is very holy. Then מוסרים אותו אלא למי שהוא צנוע ועומד בחצי ימיו. You have to be over 40, you have to be very humble, ואינו כועס, and you never lose your temper, ואינו משתכר, and you never get drunk, ואינו מעמיד על מידותיו, and you never pass by an opportunity to improve your ethical conduct. ודיברו בנחת עם הבריות. This is all sounds like the Rambam's Kiddush Hashem description of the perfect person, okay, who's on his way to achieving prophecy. וכל היודעו וזהיר בו ומשמרו בטהרה, אהוב למעלה ונחמד למטה. You have to be beloved both above and below. ואימתו מוטלת על הבריות. Then you will be impressive over to others. ותלמודו מתקיים בידו ונוכל שני עולמים, העולם הזה והעולם הבא. In other words, Rambam brings the idea of the 42-letter name into his general scheme. Thinking, contemplating, but certainly not saying, not reciting, not singing, and not making it part of everyday service. ומה מאוד רחוק מה שיובן מזה המאמר מכוונת אומרו זה. And how many people get this wrong? כי הרוב יחשבו שהם אותיות ידובר בהם. Most of them think it's a type of magic spell. לא דבר אחר, ולא יפורש להם עניין ויגיעו בהם אל העניינים העצומים. They don't see them as a challenge to rise to higher heights, וצריך להם להיכנות המידות האלו להזמנה הרבה אשר זכר. And I've mentioned what the true purpose is. ומבואר הוא שזה כולו אינו רק הודעת עניינים אלוהיים מכלל עניינים שהם סתרי תורה, כמו שביארנו. All this is part of the Sitrei Torah, the mysteries of the Torah. It's a matter for contemplation, not for saying, not for using, not for reciting every time you think that you need to get a high grade in your exam. This is something entirely spiritual. And now we get to the Rambam's acerbic point, which he often makes. וכאשר מצאו אנשים הרעים הפתאים אלו הדברים. Now, when certain evil and stupid people, got hold of this, perhaps he means us, התרחב להם הכזב, then they made the falsehood an important thing. והמאמר שיקבצו איזה אותיות שירצה, and they go around gathering letters here and there. Remember the parochet on the Nozik Shul. A lot of different letters, Yud, Hayes, Aleph, Dalet, codes, combinations. The Yorush Zehu Shem, everything suddenly becomes a Shem. Everything is a name of God. Everything has potency and power. Yaseh v'yif'al kishikatev or kishiyeomer al toar kach. If you say it in the right way, it has power. And then these lies were written down. The first evil idiot wrote this down. And then those with, tender and underdeveloped hearts and people of folly, but basically good, followed the evil idiot. And then they began to believe in the potency and efficacy of these names at a worldly level. Asher en etzlam moznaim, they have no critical capacity. Moznaim means the scales. They have no way of weighing things up. Yedu bahem ha'emet min hasheker, they don't know truth from falsehood. Vistirum, v'nimsu be'izvonutam. And now these books are then hidden and they are revealed in the assets that these people, rabbis, leave. And everybody thinks, well, if it's an ancient book you discovered in an old chest, somehow brought it down from the attic, wow, it's holy, it's great, it must be full of wisdom. The soft davar, and what we said at the end, quoting from Mishlei, heti yamin l'chol davar, an idiot believes anything. So Rambam, as you can see, was not very impressed. But for the world of the Zohar, this is just one example of the issue of God's names, and the 42-letter name. Now I'm going to get to Parashat Hashavua. So I think that's why I also chose to do this, the 42-letter name. Jeff, I think we're going to go back to you, please. There's the 42-letter name.
Okay, the 42-letter name is identified with the 42 journeys of Bnei Israel recorded in Parashat Matot.
Typical Zoharic move. We have something which we think is connected with something rational, makes sense in the text. No, everything in the Torah is connected with Sfirot, all the names of God, or something of a mystical nature. So, how many Masot did Bnei Israel undergo? 42. Rashi, we all remember Rashi, God was very kind. I think there were 12 in the first 2 years, and 8, 9, 10. And then the rest are made up in the middle. They only moved about 10 times during the 38 years. Whatever it is, look at Rashi. But
halachic ruling, but no break has been made in the Torah reading of that section. So you read it as one great big thing.
You cannot make a break in this section. Why not? Why not?
It's the name.
God's name.
Shem Hashem.
There we are. And if you open your Tukhchinsky Luach, Shmuli, you'll see Matot Masei, En Lahafsik, Bikriyat HaMasaot. Because we're all Kabbalists after all. Even the Mishnah Brura. But Mishnah Brura gives us the source. Katuv, Jeff, Katuv B'Sefer.
Zohar Hamor. The Zohar Hamor was written by Rabbi Abraham Saba.
Okay, but you didn't read the rest of the
Is that Zohar Hamor? Mishnah Brura Masaot Sheparshat Ele Mas'e En Lahafsik Behem Shem Keneged Shem Membet. The 42 letters in the name.
This is the Magen Avraham. By the way, the Magen Avraham, Rav Avraham Abeli Gumbina, was a famous Kabbalist in addition to being a great halachist. But his work, like many halakhic works, especially in Orach Chaim, on the daily ritual, which is the empowering activity of a Kabbalist, is full of Kabbalah. And I'm going to show you how the Mishnah Brura does this in different areas, and that'll be next week. That's my plan anyhow. Now the Tzror Hamor.
The Tzror Hamor was written by Rabbi Avraham Saba, 1440 to 1508, who was a rabbi and Kabbalist in Castile. At the time of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, he took refuge in Portugal together with his congregation, but only met with further misfortune.
Now, what happened in Portugal? 1492, Jews are expelled from Spain by Ferdinand and Isabella. They go to Portugal, where Henry, I think it was King Henry or King James, one of the two, wanted Jewish wisdom and money. Abarbanel became the finance minister to the King of Portugal. And the King of Portugal was very interested in navigation because the Portuguese had their eyes on the New World. They also had their eyes on India. So who did they send to the New World in 1492 with an
Columbus.
Invented exactly by Rabbi Abraham Zacuto, who was a lecturer on astronomy in the University of Salamanca, Christopher Columbus. And who did they send to Portugal?
Goa.
Vasco da Gama. And they set up Goa and that Portuguese foothold in India until the Brits came and threw them out. Okay. And we had our famous battle with Sir Roger Dowler. Every English schoolboy, instead of saying Siraj ad-Dowla, the Mughal king, thought that he was Sir Roger Dowler. But that's just a funny twist on the way the British thought that they ruled the world. Well, in fact, they did, but everything became Anglified. For scarcely
had he settled in Oporto, when King Manuel I of Portugal.
Now, King Manuel was the son of King Henry, the navigator, or King John. He was offered a marriage with a daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. Now, these were, as we know, Fabrenta Catholics, okay, who refused to be bought off by Abarbanel's generous offer of 300,000 ducats, who was hiding behind the curtain in the room when Abarbanel offered Ferdinand and Isabella money to retract the expulsion order. Torquemada, the head of the Inquisition, and he burst out of the curtain and said, "That is Judas. Is that what you're going to do?" Now, they offer their daughter to Manuel, the young prince, who just come into office because his father had died, and they said to him, "You can have her, and we'll have an alliance, but you have to get rid of your Jews." Now, Manuel had a problem, because as far as he was concerned, the Jews were a very valuable asset. And he realized from his father's experience that as soon as Spain got rid of its Jews, it plummeted, okay? Lost its brains. Brains fell out of its head. So what did he say? I cannot give them the option of expulsion. I have to forcibly convert them so that they'll be Catholics, and I will be able to keep my Jews. They'll be new Christians. So what did he do? They all came to the port, Lisbon, to disembark at once. He took a lot of water pistols, and the Dominicans and the Franciscans ran amok in the crowd of thousands of Jews, and they baptized them all against their will, even though Catholic law says that if you baptize against the will of the baptizee, the baptism is not a valid one. But he didn't care. And this meant that immediately they were all Catholics, and the priests took away the children of these Jews, and it was a terrible time. And what they did was they had to leave Portugal if they could in a clandestine fashion. So they ordered all the Jews to be expelled, but actually the expulsion was in place, but he tried to thwart it, okay? So all Jewish children, Jeff.
All Jewish children were forced to become Christians, and all Hebrew books to be burned. Saba's two
Okay.
sons,
Right.
were forcibly taken from him, and he fled from Oporto, abandoning his entire library and succeeding only at the risk of his life in saving his own works and manuscripts.
Now he had
fled-
written works and he wanted to keep the manuscripts.
Wow.
So he went back to Oporto from Lisbon, but then he's stuck in Oporto. He has to get out of Portugal. So what does he do? He fled to
Lisbon, but before reaching there was told of a new order of the king decreeing the death of any Jew with whom a Hebrew book or tefillin were found. He hid his manuscripts and tefillin under an olive tree and entered the city.
Then he
Upon
found a
Lis-
boat and he paid a huge amount of money to get on the boat. And what happened?
Upon leaving Lisbon, he attempted to recover them, but being discovered by the king's guards, he was thrown into prison. After 6 months' confinement, was sent across the frontier. He went to Fez, Morocco, where he resided for 10 years. Soon after his arrival, he fell ill, his great privations and terrible suffering having undermined his health. Eventually, he moved to Andrianople, where he recommitted.
Adrianople. Yeah,
Adrianople.
Right.
Well, in Sydney they say Adrianople.
So,
where he
they also say Notre Dame instead of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Where he recommitted to paper from memory his lost manuscripts.
Everything he did by memory, his whole Perush on the Torah, Tzror Hamor, which is the most well-known of his books.
The most famous, which is commentary on the Torah, known as Tzror Hamor.
Bundle of myrrh.
Containing the interpretations according to both the ordinary sense and the mystical sense of the Zohar. His granddaughter married Rav Yosef Karo.
There we are. So, his sons had children and he was able to get the grandchildren out. But this is an interesting story. But the Chida, Chaim Yosef David Azulai, in his Shem HaGdolim, which is a major work on all the rabbis of the period and earlier rabbis too, has an interesting anecdote. Victor, I think, Eli, let's have you, number 13. Are you still here, Eli?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. According to the Chida,
who read the anecdote in a work entitled Divrei Yosef, Reb Saba became sick on a ship taking him from Andropoli to Italy.
That was after his stay in Adrianople. He wanted to go to Italy, but he was not a well man. A storm
threatened to capsize the ship, and the captain implored Reb Saba to pray for divine assistance. He agreed, but only on condition that in case of his death, which he sensed was imminent, his body was to be delivered to the nearest Jewish community for burial. He then prayed for the safety of the vessel. His prayer was heard and the storm abated. He died shortly afterwards, and the captain, true to his word, docked in Verona and handed over the body to the Jewish community, and they buried him with great honors.
So Rabbi Avraham Saba is buried in Verona in Italy. Now, what does he write about the 42 journeys? Hypostasis. These 42 way stations have great significance. Amru Rabotenu Zal, shenichtavu kan 42 masaot. There are 42 journeys. Remez l'shem hamaforash shel 42. Hu shem shel Ana b'koach gdulati mincha tatir tzrora, etc. Vehem shiv'at tevot. Now there are 7 lines in Ana b'koach. V'chol echad yesh bo 6 otiyot olim 2 ו-40. 6 sevens are 42. V'achar שאלו המסעות רומזים לשם של 42 בסוד השם. Bam is 42, okay? So there's a great secret here. אין להפסיק החזן בקריאת הפרשה. This is where all the poskim, Magen Avraham, Aruch HaShulchan, Elia Rabbah, they all take the din, and as I said, you open your Tikuchinsky, which Debbie did and checked out, and it is there that you may not stop in the 42. Ela Shikraim Kulam im Adam Echad. One ole for the whole bang lot. לכן נראה שנכתבו בכאן אלו המסעות בשם השם, לשם המפורש. Why was it written that way? להשרישנו שורש וביטחון גדול בגאולה העתידה. Now this is another aspect of Kabbalah, that you can use it to comfort yourself in difficult times. I gave you his story because this is a tragic story, okay? This is a story, as Sailor Barrow once said, that illustrates the lachrymose history of the Jewish people. The Kabbalah can give you hope in this difficult time. Uvinyan Atzarot Ha'ovrot Aleinu. 1492, Spain. 1496, Portugal. Jews persecuted, harried, decreed against, families broken, children taken, wives separated from husbands, piracy on the high seas, killing, ransoming, a terrible breach in the lives of the Jewish people. But we can use this message of the 42 way stations to strengthen our hands. God knows everything until the end of time. And he saw all of these exiles. The fourth exile, which is the one at the hands of Christendom, okay? So God wrote the Torah, these 42 way stations, to get us to hypostasize and to think about the name of the 42 when we are in trouble, and we can use it to strengthen our faith. How? Even though we are going through very difficult times, God will take us out of the galut eventually. The difficult, the harsh labor of Egypt. Hashem shalach lahem moshiim. God sent saviors. Tatzila mitzarutam. V'lachen hitchil va'amar. Think about that. We came out of Egypt. There was Moshe and there was Aharon. Haremes bazeh, ki kemosh Yisrael afal pi shelo hayu ru'yim latzet mitzrayim lefi ma'aseihem. We didn't deserve divine redemption from Egypt. We were a bad lot, quarrelsome, fighting, lacking in faith. Nevertheless, nigalu biad Moshe v'Aaron u'bizchutam. It was Moshe and Aaron who enabled us, because of their spirituality and holiness, to be redeemed. Kenye bigula ha'atidit sheyishlach lahem Moshiach v'rav lahoshi'em. And this, of course, hives off into Mashiach Shabtai Tzvi. People forecast under Kabbalistic formulae to be Mashiachim. Okay. ופרט בגאולה הרביעית ייגאל על ידי שני משיחים, משיח ben Yosef or Mashiach ben David. Now this is another Kabbalistic idea found in the Zohar, that our eventual redemption consists of two phases. One is Mashiach ben Yosef, one is Mashiach ben David. What happens to Mashiach ben Yosef, who is a great fighter, military leader? What happens to him in the end? He dies. He gets killed in the war with Romulus and Remus. Okay. The first phase of Gula is a Gula that is not totally purely spiritual. It is Yosef hu hamashbir, Mashiach ben Yosef. We're put on our feet nationally, politically, militarily, but our culture and our religion are still defective. Okay, so Mashiach ben Yosef is in the Sukkah, Daf Nun Bet, has to die, and then Mashiach ben David comes and combines this worldly success with spiritual perfection, and then we will get to be who we really are meant to be. Olam haba, in olam hazeh, in olam haba. The Sfirot will be united. Lefi sheyesh ba'elu hashnayim va'arba'im masaot. End of line 32. Davar gadol besod gulatenu. So the 42 way stations correspond to the Shem HaMeforash, 42 letter name of God, and the whole pasuk is a message of redemption at the hands of the two Mashiachim, Moshe and Aaron. The hypostasis there is they become Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Amar vayichtov Moshe et motzaihem l'maseim al pi Hashem. If we'll read the parsha, it says that Moshe wrote where they came from and where they were going to, according to God's word. Why was God interested in having Moshe write an itinerary, a travel itinerary in the ancient Near East, mainly Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, and a bit of the plains of Moab? What does it do? Does it contribute anything? But as a Kabbalist, it contributes a huge amount, especially for Rabbi Saba and his generation. Notice that word, al pi Hashem, that phrase. The Shem Hashem Bam Ramuz Bahem. What does it mean, al pi Hashem? That the Bam, the 42 letter name of God, is there. God, when we conjure up the 42 letter name, is there waiting in the wings to redeem us. Okay? ואפילו שעברו רעות רבות וצרות ויצאו מרעה אל רעה, לא עשה בהם קלה בסוד השם הרמוז באלו המסעות. We are a peripatetic people. We've been pushed and shoved from pillar to post right through most of our history. But the 42 letter name of God keeps us in a mode of hope, so that there will be a redemption. The future redemption. Beginning of line 36. We move from mountain to valley, kingdom to kingdom, gerush. That's Jewish history. We tried hard to be accepted. Gar nit geholfen. Didn't help. The pity of it all. Ki bavonotenu galut Yerushalayim asher bisfarad. And this, of course, is the famous phrase. Spain was such a place full of lively, vibrant Jewish life, including rabbis, yeshivot, Talmud, commentaries on the Talmud, Rambam, Spain. And what happened? Out.
Burnished.
Misfarad Malchut Ishmael. And then we went to the Ottoman Empire. Vayanunu, and they weren't nice to us there necessarily either. Vayushav Kedem Sela Yishmarenu, and only the ancient one has kept us going. Ki va'avonotenu galutu Yerushalayim asher bisfarad. That's what they called it. The exile of Jerusalem in Spain. They said Spain is our Jerusalem, just like Germany said, Berlin hi Yerushalayim. Berlin is Jerusalem. Who could have thought of a richer Jewish life than we had in the early 20th century in Germany? And look what happened. Rabbi Saba says, Dikvar nit garshu kulam. If you go to Spain today, by the way, hardly a remnant of Jewish life. You have to look hard. And it was so rich and so vibrant. ולא נשאר איש בכל המלכויות, זולתי הנשארים אשר נשארו מן השבי ומן המלכות ומן הדבק והרעב. The broken, the traitors, okay, anybody who crossed over, they stayed. נשימו פליטים מחרב אדום למלכות פרס. We went from the sword of the Catholic countries. Edom, of course, was identified with Christianity. The Malchut Paras, to Persia, to Malchut Ishmael, V'inam kol amon Yisrael mikol galut Sfarad v'Malchut Fes. And today, as he says, everybody who was exiled from Spain who could have gotten out, we're reconstituting in Fez, Morocco. עד שנתקיים בנו בעוונותינו ונשארתם מתי מספר תחת אשר הייתם כוכבי השמיים לרוב תוכחה. You were once as many as the stars of the heaven, and now nothing. ואנו בטוחים בהשם, שיוציאנו מגלותנו ומדלותנו כמו שהוציא לאבותינו ממצרים. But we believe by the power of the 42-letter name of God that he will take us, he will redeem us eventually as he redeemed us from Egypt. Not because we deserve it, but because of God's mercy upon us. The 42 letters from Vahavta to Uvisharecha, and the last couple of minutes count and see how many letters there are from Vahavta to Uvisharecha. And then you will focus on the 42-letter name of God, and then great things will happen. What does the Shalah HaKadosh say? אותיות אלה הם כנגד שם של 42 שבו נבראו שמיים וארץ. 42-letter name was the underpinning of the 7 sphirot, 3 and then 7, and that's how creation took place. לכן מדקדקים בשעת קריאת פרשת ואהבת, משימים יד שמאל תוך יד ימין. This is so Kabbalistic. When you say that section, you should put your left into your right. לרמז, כי הימין שולטת על השמאל. Because you want ימין רחמים to be more powerful than the small, which is din. כובשים את הקש כשעושים רצונו של המקום ועובדים מאהבה. And the פירוש את רצון המשלה says, והנה עליך לדעת אהובי בני, אשר הם מן בית כלים. The 42 kelim, they become identified with aspects of the sphirot, vessels through which God sends down his light and spirit and permeates the lower world. להמשיך בהם אור וזיו דבקות אהבה בו יתברך. ולכן המילים אנוכי מצווך היום על, the last letters of those words, what do they make? Kelim. Kelim, shvirat ha-kelim. May I remind you of that Kabbalistic phrase? You say if something is going to be smashed up, we say, you know, we're no longer negotiating. We've broken the vessels. The vessels carry the light of God. According to Lurianic Kabbalah, they were broken. Our job is to mend them. But the Et Ratzon says the last letters of Anochi, Yud, Kaf, Mem, Lamed, rearranged, spell Kelim. שעל ידי שם בית שהם בית כלים, מורידים את האורות העליונים למטה. And now we're really getting Kabbalistic, could be Rav Kook, by the way. We bring down the upper lights, ולכן תכוון היטב באומרך, כל תיבה מפרשת ואהבת. Be very careful, focus on that section. כי בזה אתה ממשיך על עצמך צינורות אהבה מרום, גובהי מרומים, ולא יכילהו הדעת והשכל עומק הסודות שיש בכוח. You cannot even begin to fathom the mysteries and the wonderful things in all of these, in these 42 letters. ולכן תאמר את התיבות בשמחה ובאהבה גדולה, ותכוון אל פירוש המילות, ויאיר עליך אור עליון, מאור האורות. Okay, that's it. Let's finish this, stop the share. Okay, so as I said, we are all Kabbalists now, even if you didn't know it. Okay, all you sayers of Ushpizin and Ana B'Koach, you're all Kabbalists now. Okay, any comments or questions?
I have, if I remember, there is a Gemara telling that Rabbi Tarfon, when he was a child, he was under the feet of the Kohanim, and he heard the Kohen Gadol saying the Shem HaMeforash. But I don't remember where it is, and which was the Shem HaMeforash? 4 letters?
That depends upon who you ask. Rambam, we know what he would say. The Zohar will tell you it was probably the 42-letter name. Okay? Think about Tiher Rabbi Yishmael Atzmo. How does it go in the Midrash of Eile Ezra? Tiher Rabbi Yishmael Atzmo v'hizkir et Hashem b'siludim. It's a mystical passage. He says the name. Rambam says, what do you mean he says the name? You can think and you can conceptualize, but you only say the name once. That's the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Tarfon was indeed a Kohen. As a Kohen, by the way, he was a nice man, and in a Shanat Batzoret, in a year of famine, he married, could have been 42 poor women, so that they would all be able to eat truma, which only he would get as a Kohen. They wouldn't have to put money out on food because they were poor. Maybe that the number of women, again, has Kabbalistic significance. But it all will depend upon who you ask and where you are coming from. Rambam's rationality, Kabbalah, and the two, of course, as we said earlier, were both around very strongly at this period in Jewish history. From Spain, the end of Spain, the beginning of the rise of the Jewish communities in the Ottoman Empire, and then start culminating with Rabbi Yosef Karo, was the great halachist and the great mystic, set the scene for the Baal HaTanya, who was the author of Shulchan Aruch Harav and also the author of the Tanya, very creative Kabbalistic work. So that's where we are. As I said, next week I want to go to the Mishnah Brura, see how he uses the Zohar and the Kabbalah. And there should be some very interesting things about, as I said, all sorts of issues that we will refer to next week. Okay.
Great.
If so, we are on the same time, the same channel, all being well, in Yitzhak Hashem next week. I would say Besorot Tovot, with even more kavanah than I normally do.
Yeah.
And I think we will just, we'll call it an evening. And we will, all being well, regroup in good health next Wednesday evening for more mysticism.
Thank you.